a make or break based on your experience. Build teams with the household names like Microsoft, Facebook/Meta.
Because the truth is, the best teams are the ones where
Wait, Veer, thank you for jumping on this opportunity to have chat once again.
Absolute pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Really quick, over a decade in design in general of all sorts, and specifically product design, build teams with the household names like Microsoft, Facebook/Meta for the last 3 years, where we met at Gloat.
That sounds about right. Also, a very tired human being. I've got a new baby at home, so that means that I don't sleep.
Really have been waiting for this chat to happen. I personally had the chance to learn tons from Omri on process management, hiring, and how to do it better, to working with designers in squads. I know we have so many things to tackle, but maybe we start with sort of your high level learnings and thinking on what makes the best teams, where you've seen product leaders working with squads, including designers, engineering, data science, whatever that might be. What sort of a make or break based on your experience?
Over the years, I kind of worked with a bunch of teams in different companies, in different areas. And today, after all of this experience, what I really like to do whenever I speak to designers, and especially PMs, when they ask me that question, I always start with a little exercise where I go to a PM and I say, okay, imagine a Venn diagram, right? So imagine two circles, and one circle represents what designers care about, and you have another circle that represents what PMs care about, right? And as you start to kind of decipher what that means, you might think, okay, PMs, they care about the KPIs and the product needs and maybe engineering needs and timelines, right? Everything that PMs try to solve. And then when you think about designers, it might be we think about the user and the visuals and make it pretty, right? Everything that designers care about. And from my experience, the closer the two circles are, the bigger that middle bit in the Venn diagram is, the healthier the relationship is, the healthier the team is, right? So if a PM or a designer see those circles as very far apart, that's going to build a very bad relationship, because the truth is, the best teams are the ones where the perception of the relationship is that the two circles almost completely overlap, right? The idea is that PM and designers all care about everything all the time. They might not execute on both, but they care about everything. And that's especially right for designers. I find, as a designer myself, I find that designers we're kind of being pushed into this box where designers don't care about business, they don't care about numbers.
Yeah.
They want to sit down and push pixels and make pretty art so we can print it and put it on the refrigerator, right? And that's wrong. That's again, that builds a really bad relationship. And at the end of the day, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but when you do that, when you put designers in this small box, you're really missing out of the superpower that designers bring. Because the superpower that designers bring to the table, it's not pixels and it's not design. It's something a lot bigger. It's product understanding, empathy, and everything that comes around it: business, processes, engineering, all of that. That's the real superpower for designers, and that's the thing you want to harness as a PM.
Do you want to give your product designers super broad context, including what's happening in the business, what's happening with revenue, profitability, what's happening with the market? Do you want your designers to actually deal with all of that, or do you want them to be laser focused on as many tasks as possible to get more done? How do you balance this trade-off?
Right. So this is a lot of the. So everything you say, the answer is yes. Designers need and want to know all of it. Now, I think the balance between need to know and wants to know comes down to experience. So you'll find that when you work with junior designers, someone who's right out of university or doesn't have a lot of experience, they would lean on the technicalities. They would really enjoy sitting on the computer and building flows. And this is where the PM has to kind of pull them into those conversations and make them understand that, no, actually, you should care about the business. You should care about the numbers. These are things that will actually inform your work. And I find that as the designer gets more and more experience, now they're going to demand it, right? So, for example, in my
Mm.
team, we kind of set up a rule for ourselves that we, like I say, we don't leave the bed before we have all of this information, right? So if a PM comes to us and say, "Hey, I need a new button on this page," why? Who knows? We don't do the work because we expect to have all of the information laid out, either in a brief, in a Jira, right, a Confluence, like you find your own service to use, but we need to be informed in order to do our job. So without all of that information, we just don't leave the bed.
Gotcha. um, you sort of like put a minimum barrier, like an entry barrier for a new project.
Exactly. It's like, okay, you have to put 3 coins in the machine before the claw machine starts working. And some of it, and by the way, this works both ways, responsibility wise. So it's great to push the PMs to actually build that context and go and find that context and have and kind of train their muscles that you don't just ask design to do a thing without actually doing the research. So it's great for training the PMs, and it's also great for us because even designers, we really enjoy jumping into the water a bit too early, right? So if you say, "Hey, I think we need a new button here that will," and the design will go, "Leave it with me. I know exactly what I need. I'm going to do it." But no, we need the framework to stop us from going too quickly. But actually, we need to do the research. We need to know the numbers. We need to have a deeper understanding of what business goals it's going to change. Are we going to make more money, less money, better KPIs, lower KPIs? All of that goes into our design decisions.
Mm.
So I find that by defining really strict rules to what a kickoff is, how do you kick off a new project, it builds better relationship and understanding for what the PM needs and what the designer needs. So actually having those rules to what happens before the project even begins actually builds a better product at the end.
So can we double click on this? Like, can you give us some of the rules for what a kickoff is and is not?
Let's take a general, like a month project, maybe a sprint or two. Okay, so for us as designers, we kind of go by the basic. We need to know the what, the who, the when, the why. And if you break that down, so for example, the what is what the project is. What do we need to make? Right? That's very simple,
Mm-hmm.
and that's usually I find that a lot of briefs kind of stop there. This is what
Mm-hmm.
we need. We need a new funnel. We need a new filter. We need a new button. Okay, that's fine. And now we need the why. And I find that this is the place where a lot of PMs kind of screw up, where they hide the why from the designers. But actually, this is the most important piece of data. Why are we even doing this? Why are we attacking this project? Is it because we want to change some metrics? Is it because something doesn't work? Is it because we want to enable another experience later down the flow? Right? So by giving us this understanding of why we even do this, a designer can not only make a better product, but maybe even change the whole perspective, right? So if you
Yes.
come in, if a, I've been in many conversations where PM would come and say, "Hey, we need a new filter here," and by understanding the why, a design can come and say, "But why are we solving it this way? Let's solve it a whole other way." And then completely flip the project because designers can do that. They have that understanding. So that context is really important. The when, what's the timeline? How much time do I have to do the research? How much time do I have to hand it in? Um, where does it happen? Does it apply only to one area of the product? Does it apply to different places? Again,
Mm-hmm.
designers tend to have a really general and deep understanding of the platform. So I might say, okay, you're making a change here, but this is actually going to affect another team that I work with,
Yes.
and that can again give a lot of value. So by answering all the basic WH question
Gotcha.
and providing it within the brief, that's a great kickoff. And then you can sit and write that Jira ticket or whatever you want once all those questions are being answered.
Gotcha. That makes so much sense. Yet I feel like more often than not, all of this is not addressed in kickoffs. To be honest.
Right. And by the way, the reason it's not addressed is not the tactics of it. It's not because PMs don't want to do that. I see it as a perception issue, right? So there's kind of two questions when it comes to the PM and designer relationship. And the big one is perception. And like we said in the beginning, I feel like a lot of PMs, there are good ones, but maybe less experienced ones tend to perceive design almost as a printer, right? You go to the designer, you hit Command
Mm-hmm.
P, and you get a JPEG.
Mm-hmm.
But that is, again, it's reducing a designer
Yeah.
it's taking Superman and telling them to take a cab. Why? Superman can fly. Let the designer fly.
Oh,
So
I
once you
love this
change that
analogy.
perception from, well, I like it because it makes designers Superman. So why the hell not? But the um, the idea is that rather than perceive designers as a utility, try to think of them as a co-pilot, right? Think of them as the navigator sitting right next to you in the cockpit, flying this plane. So it's not just another capacity that you have on your team, but this is your partner. This is the person who's there, right there with you, navigating the plane and really setting the course for the strategy, for the tactics. And once you make that shift in your
Mm-hmm.
thinking, then all the tactics happens naturally, right? Because once you see design as a co-pilot, of course
Yes.
you're going to talk about business needs. Of course you're going to talk about how customer success is going to be affected, how sales are going to
Yes.
be affected, how it's going to affect customers, right? So now it's not a question of pixels. It's not a question of just user experience. Now it's a whole product company conversation. So that small but meaningful shift can really change the relationship.
Yes, absolutely. Makes so much sense. But if we, let's say I'm a product leader, I want, like, you preach to the choir. I hear you, and I want to start implementing all of these tomorrow. Where do we start? So, like, what are some like rituals or habits that, like, practically I can write down, like, almost like a key list, and make sure that I cover.
Right. So we talked about a kickoff, right? So a kickoff kind of happens it's like this ceremony that happens. It can happen a few times a week if you have a few projects running in parallel. It can happen
Hmm.
once a sprint. Maybe if you have a bigger project, then it may be a few months. But this is something that we already know that happens a few times in a quarter, in a half, in a year, right?
Yeah.
So we can kind of make sure that when you kick off a project, we have a lot of information there. Now, another thing that okay, let me say it this way. Um, if the process of you sharing information with your designer is done through the kickoff, that's a bit too late. It's important, but it's slightly too late because you might, as a PM, you might think, well, this is a lot of homework to do every 2 weeks, bringing the numbers, going to
Yes.
analytics, and like there's a lot of work to be done here. But the idea, again, in a perfect world where the relationship is working, most of this information is already ingrained within the designer. And I'll give you an example. So when I worked at Facebook, aka Meta,
Hmm.
so we one of the projects I worked on was Facebook Lite, which is kind of a version of Facebook for emerging markets.
Hmm.
And during one of the periods of work, then our focus was Brazil. Okay, now if you listen to what I said before, you might say, okay, it's time to kick off a project. Let's get on a plane. Everyone go to Brazil. Let's do some research. Let's come back and do the work. And then 2 weeks later, everyone on the plane again. Let's go. Now that's fine with me. I don't know if my wife would like that, but that's not the way you actually do the project. The idea is um, to preload all of this information ahead of time. So what we end up doing, we got the teams, PMs, designers, and analysts. We got on a plane and we spent a week in Brazil, and we talked to people. We did all the research, we did all the testing, and all of the information kind of held us for about 6 months of data. And whenever we kicked off a project, we land on that data um, as a starting point. So the idea is not to do the research every week, every kickoff, but um, once every 6 months or a year, you kind of build this institutional knowledge with the designers. So when it's time to speak to customers or do any kind of research or talk to salespeople, bring the designer in. The designers should be part of that conversation.
Mm,
And you'll be amazed of how the outcome, the product that they build changes based on having that institutional knowledge, right? And then 6 months later, you go and you do it again. So when you learn the information as a PM, make sure the designers learn that information with you.
gotcha. Bringing here like points about like the mindset that is needed to set, to set this train going, which totally makes so much sense. Um, we're almost out of time, but there's so much more to talk about. I'll try to make this next two questions as specific as I can. So starting with the first one, did you ever see like this happening completely the other way, or like some very clear red signal for, red sign for like this company doesn't work this way, and like something that we can learn from, from this sort of like not great experience?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna tell you two stories, both on either side of the scale, right? So on the first far end, I spoke to a friend of mine who's a design leader at a big company,
Mm-hmm.
and she was kind of asking me, how do we get a seat at the table for design, right? That's a question that designers keep asking. That's our Niagara Falls, right? This is our Everest. Like, this is the thing that we want to get, a seat at the table. And she was asking me, like, how do we do that? Can you give me some advice? And I said, well, one tip that I can have is when you have your weekly meetings between all the designers and all the PMs, this is a good place to show your work, show your vision, maybe share some pixels that you've been working on. And she said, well, what meeting are you talking about? We never have a meeting between designers and PM. And for me, that was such a clear signal that the divide is just too hard.
Oh,
In most teams that I worked with, designers and PMs kind of saw themselves as an extended family, and we always sat together, always talked together. Um, so just by changing that small idea of, it's not just a design team and a PM team and we work in squads, but we one team, we one group. We our outcome, our tools are different. So just by putting everyone in a room together once a week, I find that it's such a huge change to a company's culture. Um, Now, on the other hand, I also seen it work the other way, where designers have such a seat at the table, where they kind of perceive themselves sometimes to lead ahead of the PMs. And I've seen that fall apart as well. So on a different big company that I worked with, it was kind of road mapping time, kind of to build the vision of the company and the product. And what the designers did, they did their own little offsite, right? So they brought like 20 or 25 designers, went in a really cool hotel, like a cool
wow.
Seattle hotel, and we kind of spent a week kind of building our ideas and our vision and where we want to take the project. And we ended up with a really nice kind of presentation of what we believe we need to do. What we didn't know is the PMs did exactly the same thing on the next hotel, right? So they spent a week doing
Wow.
exactly the same exercise. And what we ended up having is two visions and two different kind of PowerPoint presentations that at that point we couldn't really reconcile because we just went on different path. And just because the type of relationship we had, we just ended up throwing all of the design work to the bin and going with what the PM suggested. um, and that's a place where designers might take too much of a seat at the table, because we as designers, like, this is me talking to my friends, we need to remember that we are part of a relationship too. So it's not just us expecting to be listened to, but we need to listen as well. So when it's time to make those decisions, those kind of roadmap decision, vision decisions, we have to work together. This is the responsibility is on both sides. And again, it's a pilot and co-pilot, and they have to sit in the same room. You can't have a co-pilot on a different plane trying to help. Like, it just doesn't work. So I've seen it work both ways, where designers are completely ignored and where designers take too much initiative. And obviously, the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Wow, this is it's so um surprising to some extent to see how large the spectrum, like how big the spectrum could be for how to go about this collaboration. Absolutely mind blowing to think like how different this can be. Um, I like we're at time, but I want us to continue the conversation because I haven't asked you um, how to to figure out and sort of like try to gauge in when interviewing whether like interviewee what kind of relationship they are looking for, how like whether they are a good fit for the product design culture of the company, and how, if whether they're going to be like value add for creating this process, but also as an interviewee, which is might be like harder, how to gauge what the company is like when it comes to getting a seat at the table for product designers, how to think about it and ask it as an interviewee, um, as a product designer, perhaps like more junior, looking into more senior positions. What can you do to to prove your worth to get a seat at the table? Um, like all of this is and much more. I think we should schedule some time to just chat about that. If that sounds good to you, we should do it at some point in the near future.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I can talk about this stuff forever, especially interviews. I do a lot of mentoring and helping people prepare for interviews and teaching people how to interview.
Mm,
So, just give me a time. I can talk about that for
amazing,
hours.
amazing. So what would be the best way for people to reach out to you?
LinkedIn. I'm prolific on LinkedIn. I write a lot about these subjects, about other stuff. So Omri Dve on LinkedIn, and add me, follow me. I'm there every week.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We will definitely need to do this again soon.
Thank you so much. Always fun to chat.